So for some new stuff, let's look now at the prophets and practitioners, or some of them related to socialism, to try and understand what this thinking system is about. So Niccolo Machiavelli wrote a book called The Prince in 1515. To summarise some of the key values that come out from this, the end justifies the means. This is a government without God, right? Everything is permissible. Politics have no relations to morals. So a politician who says one thing one day to gain your favour and your vote can do and say the very opposite thing the next day. There's nothing wrong with that. When you are in power, it's your responsibility to be in power and to do whatever best fits power, because you know better because you're in charge. It's the ruling class and the ruled class, so I tell you what you need to hear so that I remain in power to help you, because that's for your good. So that's the rationality of it. You've got the concept of the useful idiot. Now, these are paid criminals to create chaos, to undermine opponents, to help you seize or maintain power. I think we're seeing cases of the useful idiot in America. Right now, you've got billionaires who have funded lots of people's bail money getting out. They're now funding bail for people across America because they'll most likely vote for one side of the party. There's huge amounts of money being thrown into that. You have had people paid to go to opposition party meetings to protest and to create chaos. So there's money flowing and all of that, for example, in America today. Another famous case of a useful idiot would be in Germany, where Hitler deployed the brown shirts, led by a noted homosexual, and their role was to go to opposition party meetings, again to create chaos, and they created an enormous amount of chaos. So much so that when Hitler seized power, he had to demonstrate that he was capable of bringing law and order. So you have what was called the Night of the Long Knives, on which all of the brown shirts were killed. So they're the useful idiots. They're people that you give a cause, and they believe so much in the cause that they run for it, go for it, not realising they're actually pawns in somebody else's bigger game. Never waste a crisis is another concept that sits here, and you find that recently on the leaders of politicians in America as they saw the coronavirus coming. So I won't give you names of who's said these things, but they are deliberately seeking to leverage things that are entirely open about what they seek to do as well. George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel was a professor at the University of Berlin. He taught about socialism. To summarise some concepts, the state is God. Walking on earth, we must worship the state. All the worth which the human being possesses, he possesses only through the state. The state recognises no authority but its own and acknowledges no abstract rules of good or bad. The state is the ultimate end which has the highest right against the individual, whose highest duty is to be a member of the state. To summarise here, on the left, the basic idea is the state is the greatest good, not the individual. The contrast is it's a more Christian idea on the right. The individual is the greatest good. Government exists to government should self-limit its powers, because government exists to protect an environment within which the individual can be truly free. So the individual's the greatest good, or the state can't have both. One of his most famous contributions was the Hegelian Dialectic. You might have heard of, or might not have, thesis, antithesis, synthesis. And this is really going into a whole sort of area of thought related to change theory. How do we manipulate peoples as a group to do what we want them to do and to say thank you? So I explained this one to my son Jonathan a while ago. He said, "What are you doing?" So I said, "I'm reading about this." So to explain it, I said, "Okay, I want you to go and get the broom and sweep this whole front area of concrete at the front of our house. It's going to take you about half an hour." And he's like, "No, I don't want to do it." So I said, "Okay, I want you to go and get the hose. I want you to scrub down the entire house. I want you to sand the house, and I want you to paint the entire house twice. It's going to take you 2 to 3 weeks." He says, "No way, I'm not doing it." I said, "Okay, I'll let you off all of that painting of the house. Get the broom, sweep the front yard, it'll take 30 minutes. He said, "Okay." Right? So, change theory. So how do you manipulate crowds? Create a crisis, never waste a crisis. Right? And you leverage it to achieve your own goals, and you can have them thanking you at the end of it. So, one of his key students was a man named Karl Marx, and this is where his ideas came from. And he went to a few countries, tried some things, didn't work out, went back to Russia, and wrote the Communist Manifesto in 1848, claiming to stand for the rights of the working man. He eliminated the bourgeois, I don't know how to pronounce that, but that's the middle class business owners. So all of you who have been industrious and have taken initiative to try and have a business or buy a house or get ahead, you are now the enemy. Sorry, you're probably dead. He made the state like God. He ended religious freedom. He established free public education because you have to indoctrinate the children with your own thinking so you don't have rebellions. So education is important, and this is why the left as a general trend will be against homeschooling and private schools. They want everything public education because they can control the agenda of it. He removed private ownership of property, and he was able to justify it all with Darwinian theory. Because if Charles Darwin is correct and we're just accidents of chance, then there's no actual morality, and the fundamental principles aren't love, selflessness and humility, it's power. It's just power. So what do you have to do to get ahead and to have power? He killed a few million people setting up this equality-based society. He was right into equality and caring for people, as you can tell. He was replaced later by Vladimir Lenin. He realised that you couldn't keep people subservient and being helped by you to be equal. They were so dumb you couldn't help them to be equal, so you were going to have to force them to be. So with a bit of disappointment, abandoned the kind methods and realised that he had to get people into a position of fear or he had to keep them dependent. So you've either got to be terrified of me because I've got secret people listening and we'll just randomly arrest people to keep you scared. In fact, we'll come through and just randomly grab 3 people for no reason and kill a lot of them in front of you, just so you know we're in power so you feel unsettled. So you've got to keep people scared, or you've got to keep them dependent, like with insufficient food, so they've got no time to think about politics, they're just trying to survive. This keeps them weak so they can be dominated for their good because you're creating an equality-based society. So this is what he did. One of his famines to weaken people resulted in 5 million deaths by starvation, as one example. But he became unwell, if I remember it correctly, and was quite disappointed that the next one, Joseph Stalin, came into power and he had to watch on. And Joseph Stalin took it to another level. His Great Purge, for example, of 1936 to 38, included the execution of 1.2 million Communist Party members, government officials, military leaders and others accused of being disloyal. If you don't want anyone to overthrow your power, you have to even weed out the people who could threaten your power from amongst your own. He is believed to have murdered 61 million people all by himself. But catch this, there's another disciple of Hegel who read his materials. I don't believe they knew each other personally, and that was Adolf Hitler, also a disciple. He decided to establish socialism in Germany. And you'll be beginning to pick up the political terminologies clashing. He called it the National Socialist Workers' Party, abbreviated to the Nazi Party. He's influenced by Hegel, he's influenced by Charles Darwin and by a key writer who followed Darwin's teachings, influenced by Friedrich Nietzsche, a famed atheist. And he pursued the exact same socialistic goals and applied the same socialistic methodologies to take over power, even though people would say that the fascism he created opposes socialism. Until he was the single leader and the sovereign of Germany. It's called fascism. He was responsible for only about 15 million murders, so he's not actually so bad in the whole picture. His social Darwinism meant that the weak were of no value. And I think it's interesting that the West has so arrogantly criticised Hitler for years for rounding up the elderly, infirm and the people with disabilities and eventually convincing the populace to agree that we needed to get rid of these people. And so the populace helped to round them up, to send them off, in many cases, to gas chambers, which to me is just abhorrent. The great irony of our arrogant Western culture is that we're now trying to push through laws to do the exact same things. Isn't it interesting how far our ethics can be changed? Are we really thinking? Are we moral, or have we lost our moral compass? He also decided to be a really honest guy. And this was the key problem with fascism. It actually made sense in its inherent logic if its assumptions, like that there is no God and so on, and Darwinism are true. He said all races aren't equal. At the end of this game, we're going to have a ruling class and a ruled class. So let's just jump to the conclusion. It's not going to be equal, folks. Okay, so everybody who's got my skin colour, we're going to be called the Aryan race because it's about power. It's about one people group dominating another and everyone else isn't. And so hence the justifying of the killing of blacks, Jews, Slavs and Gypsies. In Italy, it's also fascism. Argentina was the same. But in Italy, they said our inequality is not going to be based around race, it's going to be based around class. And so that was a class-based discrimination.